Oh, hey, it's good to see you again. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of See It Again Cinema. Tonight's episode is on The Great Escape by John Sturges, and my guest is my good friend, Tim Tidball. So, Tim, what do you love about this movie?
This movie's got it all, Sam. Action, adventure, great characters, great story.
Yeah. How old were you when you first saw this movie?
Well, I can't tell you exactly, Sam, but I'm pretty sure I'm right in that the movie came out in 1963. I was born in 1955, so I'm somewhere. I mean, I'm not sure that my dad and I, that's who I saw the movie with, went right when it was released, or so I could have been anywhere from 8 to 10 years old.
Yeah, movies stayed in theaters a lot longer back then.
Although this one we saw at the outdoor theater.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is a whole nother conversation about going to the outdoor movies when I was a kid. I mean, there's I don't know if you want to go down that road right now, but just the charm of the outdoor movie theater, and popping up your own popcorn before you went and loading into the station wagon. But for some reason, my memory at least, and if any of my family members ever see this, they may tell me I'm wrong about this, but I think it was just me and my dad in the station wagon who went to this movie.
Well, I hope your family members all do watch this episode and like and subscribe to See It Again Cinema. This movie was obviously a big, successful blockbuster type film. What are your memories of it? What do you remember the impressions it made the first time you saw it?
Yeah, this movie had a huge impact on me. The thing, I guess, that stands out more than anything, I mean, wouldn't you say this falls in the action-adventure genre? I mean, it was kind of an edge-of-your-seat kind of movie. So, right, for starters, that it had that appeal. But also, I was an impressionable young kid. I had 2 older brothers and an older sister. And, I thought they were all pretty cool. But sorry, not as cool as Steve McQueen. So that's my biggest takeaway. Steve McQueen, I just thought embodied cool in this movie. In fact, I remember when I got home, I managed to find a sweatshirt that my mom allowed me to cut the sleeves off of. So I cut them about right there, as I remember Steve had them cut, and had my Stingray bicycle. So, the scenes in the movie where he's in the middle of his escape, and there's a scene where he's riding his stolen motorcycle, and hopping fences and so forth. So I was a big pretender. Yeah. Still am. But I spent a lot of time being Steve McQueen on my Stingray bicycle, riding around the neighborhood, 56th and Sumner, Roberts Park area.
Did you ever make some sweet jumps?
Let's just go with yes, I certainly did. Yeah.
I was 12 when I saw the movie, and then my English teacher had a copy of the book it's based on, and I remember just watching the movie and being fascinated by the ingenuity of how they escaped, and especially the how they would get the dirt and release it in the yard through the pant legs.
Which informed a later movie, I think.
Shawshank Redemption? Yeah. That is one I'm planning to do a later episode on, so maybe I'll bring you back for that one.
Yeah.
When I was doing some research into this film, I found out that John Sturges, the director, who's more known, I think, for a lot of his westerns, he wanted to adapt this really soon after World War II, but because of the ending and what happens to a majority of the escapees, no one thought that it could be a Hollywood successful story because there is that bummer, spoiler alert, but I'm assuming if you're watching this episode, you've seen this movie before. It's really amazing that it was the success of his Seventh Samurai remake, The Magnificent Seven, which gave him enough money and clout to pursue his dream project.
I haven't read the book.
The book's really good.
Yeah.
From what I remember is that I felt that the movie was a great adaptation of the book, and they didn't leave very much out, and you felt like you got to know each of the different prisoners. But one thing that surprised me when I recently bought The Great Escape, which was recently reissued on the Criterion Collection, is it's a long movie. 172 minutes. So almost 3 hours.
Really?
Now,
No, that surprises me.
yeah. Now, it surprises me too because I remember being a kid and seeing movies that I thought were way too long. Like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I could barely get through. And that was aimed for kids. But this movie, to my memory, did not seem long at all. Like, it just seemed like it was like just a great adventure story. So, one thing I'm looking forward to finding out when we watch it today is I want to see, does it seem long now, or is it like really well paced as a story? So that's something I'm curious about. And are there any things, specific memories of the movie that you're curious about?
I certainly didn't remember it as a long film.
Yeah.
Not that I really had anything to compare it to necessarily when I was that age, but so yeah, I guess that's a tip of the hat to the movie makers.
Yeah.
That they made a long movie that didn't feel long.
Yeah.
But no, I think just, I mean, like I said earlier, the thing that really stands out for me watching it as a kid, I was just taken with mainly Steve McQueen, but I thought Charles Bronson's character was really cool. Danny, if I remember right. Mm-hmm. Well, and that whole cast of characters, there's some great characters in this movie. So I don't know. I don't think anything, I mean, it's, I feel like today lots of times we watch a movie and it's, you can spend a lot of time unpacking and thinking, what were they saying here and so on and so forth. So I wonder if there are, other than the perhaps obvious, let's bring the realities of war into a theater, to maybe inform people and remind people the ugliness and, what people have to go through and live through in times of war. So I don't know if there's, it'd be interesting to watch it. And I'm sure I have seen this movie since I was 8 years old, but I'm not sure I ever sat down and watched it beginning to end. I think I've seen bits and pieces on TV and so forth.
Most of the time that I choose to watch a movie on this show, it's something that I haven't seen in 20 years. And I have to say that this one, I don't think I've seen since middle school. And even all these years later, one of the emotional scenes that really sticks with me is the one kind of balding guy who is losing his eyesight and how he tries to arrange the matches or place something so that he can basically try to fool someone that he still has his eyesight. And, I think you gotta be a pretty heartless person to not just feel the deep pathos of that character, that he wants to escape, but he has this disability that is making him a risk.
Yeah, a liability,
Yeah, so...
Yeah, I remember that too, and it's James Garner's character who kind of takes him under his wing and the good old American.
Yeah.
With, as I remember, like a cable knot turtleneck white sweater under his blue jacket. He was very dashing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I certainly remember that part. That really touched me, and then for some reason there are a few scenes that just, as we're talking about it, kind of you said that, and he had things like the number of paces in his little room figured out so he could pull this off and fool anybody. But James Garner was on to him, and I think it was kind of their little secret. Maybe they told the head guy, who I can picture, but I can't say his name. But I also remember one guy who was a minor character, the guy that for some reason, I mean, you're thinking, okay, what was this guy in a prisoner of war camp? How is it that he had this oversized suitcase or case with him? And there was a little foreshadowing, as I remember, people were saying, that thing's too big, and let's, and, he was insistent on taking this thing. I don't think we ever learned what he's got in there, but if I remember right, he's the guy, because you'll remember their calculations are wrong. They think they've dug far enough to be in the forest, but they're
in the
50
clearing.
yards short or whatever.
Oh, man.
So the first guy and I can still remember that shovel poking up through the ground, and whoever it was, the first one to pop his head up, turns around and realizes, shit, the forest is back there.
Yeah.
So he has to break that news. So then they work out that elaborate system for signaling with a rope. Now it's time to go. So the last guy into the forest pulls on the rope to give him the signal to come. And sure enough, this guy with the big suitcase stumbles at the top of the hole. And then that's when the lights pop on. I mean, I could be all wrong. This is my memory of this.
Well,
but
this is why the show, it's kind of film appreciation, but it's also an inquiry into pop culture's effect on our memories. And I think it's fun to revisit the film and see how vibrant those impressions of the story are all these years later. Well, all right. It's time to begin and watch The Great Escape again. We'll catch you after the credits roll. All right.
All right.
Yeah.
See it again, see it again. Cinema, 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 see it again, see it again. And then talk about it.
Welcome back. That, as Blythe would say, is splendid. So, hey, what'd you think of seeing it again after all these years?
I would say the movie definitely holds up, and my specific memories that I had of the movie, I mean, they were pretty right on. I was off on on a few little things, like I was sure it was that big suitcase that was the thing that tripped them up and alerted the Germans to the escape that was in progress. That's not how it worked out exactly. Yeah. When I first saw James Colburn's character with that big suitcase, I thought, it was James Colburn is the guy that tipped him off, but turned out it wasn't, which for a moment there in the rewatching, I was kind of bummed out because I like his character a lot. But no, I think, boy, it holds up. I mean, the other thing I was thinking, especially, so I was thinking about the fact that my dad took me to this movie. Not that, I mean, he was probably seeing it for the first time, just like I was. So that could launch us into a whole conversation about what parents deem as okay for their 8, 9, 10-year-old child to watch. But I didn't really think about it much until the scene when the truckload of guys are mowed down at the end of the movie. I'd kind of forgotten that. I mean, it's funny, there are lots of scenes that I could just see the very beginning of the scene and think, oh yeah, it's this part. I sure forgot about this. Like when they set up the 3 German officers at the little outdoor cafe who were gunned down. Yeah, I think it holds up really well. And I noticed there was really, I'm not sure how intentional it was, but I really felt the overall feeling, sort of feeling of relief and fresh air when so much of the movie is them in the bleak camp or in the tunnel digging in the dirt. And, it just seems to keep going and going and going. And then when they're finally, the first little hint of it is when Steve McQueen's character drops down the green grass into the hole, and they're visibly excited. And then the rest of these scenes when they're out in the countryside and so forth, that juxtaposition was pretty stark. I don't remember noticing that or thinking about that before, but that really stood out to me this time.
Well, in so many of those sequences after they've made their escape, the camera seems freer. Like when Steve McQueen takes off on the motorcycle after he first gets it, it's very subtle, but it's quite impactful, is that the camera moves vertically up and suddenly you get a wider view of how free the landscape is, and you can see into the distance, and the mountains of Switzerland seem like, wow. So even the camera work seems freer and less boxed in, and I think that green color of the countryside and the camera movement all contributes to this feeling of like, oh my God, anything could happen now.
Right.
So, before the theme song, we talked about like, wow, this movie's almost 3 hours long, but it doesn't feel that long. Like, it's scene after scene. There's a really good reason that scene is in there. So, it flows well. Are there any moments or aspects of the film that you notice now that maybe the 9-year-old Tim didn't?
Yeah, that's, it's been so long ago that's kind of a hard question to answer. But one thing I thought about, maybe this isn't related, but I just thought about that, from the spoils of war. I mean, take a horrible thing like war, but if you could put a positive spin on how that births these movies like this, because you have a natural built-in villain, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and in those days it was, it was easy to just, we were all on board and the Germans were the bad guys.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking about a construction of a story. So you've got that built-in villain. It's already in place. And then the way they put the movie together, you just kind of get to know each one of these little players, which lends itself well to after the escape. Then they follow each one of them. And it's like they're all together, but then we get to know them gradually one by one. And then that's sort of even more pronounced once the escape happens. But from a movie making a storytelling position, that that's the ironic thing, is something as brutal as war can birth these kinds of experiences.
Yeah,
right?
Really great stories.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the built-in villain, when the middle school me just thought like, oh, the colonel of the camp is such he's like Grand Moff Tarkin in Star Wars, just this tight-lipped, stick up his rear end, kind of guy. But watching it as an adult, there are these little moments where he regrets that this is his job and that he is just wanting to get through the war.
I certainly don't remember, like at the beginning of the movie when he's having the exchange with the ranking officer, the prisoner, it's this understanding that, this is a sworn obligation on our part. We took an oath to try to escape if we were ever taken prisoner, which I'm assuming is a real thing. That's part of the oath that you take if you are captured, that you will try to escape. So, and he seems to understand that. It's like, well, okay, I know you're going to, but this is a top notch. You're not going to succeed. It was almost like good luck trying. Yeah.
Well, and it almost like when I think about, say, head football coaches who have a collegial respect for each other, the camera work seemed to be really balanced, where they're on the same plane, same eye line. And while we were watching the film, you mentioned like, oh, it seems strange that they salute each other. And I think that those are just those little details that are underlying the plot that add a certain a respect they have for each other, because neither of them really want to be doing what they're doing, but it's their duty and obligation as soldiers on their side of the whatever.
There was hardly a character in the movie that there were a couple that I thought, boy, I don't really remember that guy. But for the most part, Werner,
Yeah.
Such a sympathetic character.
Yeah.
Just like he was, I can't remember what he said he was studying until he became part of the Hitler Youth. You know? So, here's this collection of people who would rather be doing anything other than what they're doing.
Yeah.
Lives collectively, all these lives that are interrupted for this terrible reason. And he's just sort of, a bit of a bumbling character, but they didn't go over the top with that. I mean, Werner's pretty sympathetic character and easy prey for James Garner's character, but
ends up still being the one that finds the first tunnel. Other aspects of the movie that I hadn't considered was every time I heard the score by Elmer Bernstein, I just kept thinking of Indiana Jones movies and how much John Williams seems to borrow from certain of those dark flourishes. The way the Nazis are portrayed in this film, it's very much like in Raiders of the Lost Ark or The Last Crusade. I'm particularly thinking about Indy and his dad, played by Sean Connery, trying to escape Nazi Germany. It's like, wow, I feel like Spielberg saw this movie and it's like, I want to pull as much of this into my own action adventure films. So, that was a lot of fun.
I think sometimes the score is something that, especially little Tim, you didn't really think about it.
Yeah.
You take for granted it's not on your radar, but boy, is that a catchy theme song. I mean, that's one that I anticipate I'll be whistling for days to come.
Yeah, and I love how it's always sequenced to really kick in to when that ball and glove hits Steve McQueen's hand.
Yeah. That was one of the draws when I saw it as a little kid too. It was just, I remember doing things like that. Just could spend hours on end throwing a ball against a wall. Was
how they constructed the character for Steve McQueen's role. I know today they would test market and do all kinds of things, but it almost seems like it was perfectly designed for young American boys to latch onto and be like, that's the guy I'd want to be. Even though, to me, I'd be like, I don't know if I want to be in solitary confinement for 2 weeks. Just I feel like I would crack up like Ives.
Right. No, he's definitely portrayed as the sort of independent, unflappable sort of. You can try, but you can't beat the guy. I mean, he's the total sort of stereotypical resilient American, right?
Well, I know you're such a fan of Casablanca. He also seems to me informed by Rick Blaine's character but instead of it being I don't stick my neck out for no one, he's like, no, I'm doing this thing for me, and I'm working solo or with my partner. But eventually he does become part of the collective effort. Yeah. I think that's a neat transformation that the film, it's played in a very psychologically real way. It's like he has to lose Ives to realize that there's something more important, or like he has a greater contribution than just trying to escape for himself.
Right.
So, it seems that the war genre, or the way Hollywood makes movies about different periods of conflict and war, it continues to evolve. If someone, and I hope that they never do, remake this film, what do you think that they would change about it for today?
I don't know. Do you think the movie makers would feel a need to, because it's pretty unusual, I think, to have a movie that doesn't have a single female character in the movie. There's probably a way that you could weave it would probably be a stereotypical kind of, I don't know, I'm not sure how you do it. So that would be interesting. Like if the people putting together a remake would feel the need to insert something like that in there. That I'm with you. I hope nobody ever does try to redo it. And I think just watching it again, it was still gripping, and it wasn't just like, oh, this is a nostalgic thing I'm doing, just rewatching this movie. And, it was, it held up. Even though I knew where we were headed, it was suspenseful, and it had me,
Yeah. If they remade it today, I think that there is and rightfully so, an interest in making sure that there are parts for people who've been underrepresented in film history. But as far as how that plot is in that setting, I don't know if there's a role for Zendaya or Donald Glover.
Right.
I suppose one of those pilots, if they were to remake it today after seeing Red Tails, George Lucas's African-American centric World War II fighter pilot movie about the Tuskegee Airmen, I imagine one of the pilots would be black, but I think they would then run up against this issue of once he escapes and gets into the woods, it doesn't matter how they've used shoe polish to dye, some blankets. How does a black pilot blend in Nazi Germany? Right. I think the film holds up for its time period, and I was curious, before the break, I brought up that your dad fought in World War II. Watching it now, is there any, as far as how your family's personal history with the war, did that affect how you were viewing the film at all?
I guess not so much, but I would be, it's indicative of, this happens all the time when it's not unique to me, where you wish a loved one, particularly your father, was still around to ask questions. So I would love to have him sitting in, he didn't miss it by too many years. But just little things like we talked about before, this sort of mutual respect that we both picked up on, and saluting one another. And, I would be curious to know if that rang true for him, if that was ever part of his experience. But no, and I think you were asking about how they'd redo it. I think that it is a brand new prisoner of war camp. But even given that, the movie's pretty spiffy for the most part. Even when Steve McQueen's character's in the cooler, it's stark, obviously, but it's, they never really take us into the gritty, sort of grimy, sort of hell solitary confinement would be. There are a lot of scenes like that they just make the decision to, well, we don't need to go, like when Ives and when they tunnel out, and we only know that didn't work out because we see them being led back into the cooler, all dirty. Yeah. Right.
So do you feel like the film maybe downplays some of the psychologically damaging effects of what it was like to be a prisoner of war?
I think so.
Yeah, I think
so.
Because I could see after 3 days of being in isolation, I'm keeping track with the hatch marks, but I'm using my own fecal matter to make
right.
It does seem like. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not sure in 1963 if movies had really necessarily gone there, kind of, I can imagine close-ups on a distraught face or, whatever, little minute details that movie makers might want to go to today. They just kind of left that out, and I don't know if that was a conscious choice or if that was movie makers weren't really going there.
Yeah, we had to wait for Apocalypse Now, or Platoon, to show a different kind of madness of war. Any final thoughts about the film?
I don't know that I've got any final thoughts that we haven't mentioned already, Sam. But this was fun. I like this. I like this idea that you have and this process. This is fun. I feel like I know The Great Escape. It's transcended, just like, that's a
Yeah.
That's a good movie. That's one of my first, the whole experience of going to it with my dad, just the two of us, which I'm not sure how that happened. That's unusual that just the two of us would go, but it's gone beyond that to,
You feel like the film The Great Escape a little bit more because of getting to rewatch it and talk about it. Well, all right. That'll do it for this episode of See It Again Cinema, where old movies make magical new memories. Tim, thanks for being on the show.
Sam, thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
See it again, see it again. Cinema, see it again, see it again. Well, cinema, see it, you gotta see it again, see it again. Cinema, see it again, see it again.
Tim, what do you love about this movie?
This movie's got it all, Sam. Action, adventure, great characters, great story.
Yeah. It doesn't have any women, though. It's not going to pass the Bechdel test, but that's okay. It's a really good film. Okay. Cheers.
Cheers, Sam.
That's as good as smuggled coffee in a POW camp.
Better.